The next speaker is Rob Van Os. I actually met Rob based on the work that he did for the SOC-CMM. This was something that I was doing some research and found the SOC-CMM really phenomenal resource that I encourage everybody to take a look at. And since that time when I initially discovered it, I've had an opportunity to talk with Rob and collaborate with him on a couple of different things. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for what he's doing, especially the material that he's releasing publicly, for the common good. He currently works as a product owner for Security Operations Center. He's basically responsible for day-to-day operations and operational improvement. And a lot of what you will be hearing in his talk today really focuses on how to drive that operational improvement for you and for what you need. Rob founded Argo's cybersecurity assessment with the intention of helping the cyber defense teams to focus on maturation and growth in the efforts that they actually have. So there's a lot of information that's coming your way in this next talk. We'll go ahead and just make sure that we have the sound and video and all that stuff there. Rob, are you connected and ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Yeah, fantastic. Really looking forward to your talk today, and I want to turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, so good morning, everyone. At least it's good morning to you. It's good afternoon for me because it's now 20 minutes past 5, which is, of course, the end of a working day at the end of a working week. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm not so very sharp or do something strange like fall asleep mid-sentence. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about improving SOC maturity using the SOC-CMM. I'm also going to be talking about how to use the SOC-CMM in a modern approach for cyber defense, for basically your response and your detection capabilities. Chris already said some things about me, so great, thank you for that, Chris. This is just my resume in short. Product owner of the Cyber Defense Center at the Volksbank. Volksbank is the 4th largest bank in the Netherlands. I have a lot of experience in security monitoring and security incident response and other security operational topics. I'm also the vice chair of the FI-ISAC and the chair of the FI-ISAC SOC CISO working group, in which we do a very close collaboration with all the financials in the Netherlands. Besides the SOC-CMM, I'm also the lead author of the Magma use case framework and the Tahiti threat hunting methodologies. If you're not familiar with those, I'm not going to be talking about them today, but possibly very interesting for you to go into them. All right. So let's start out with, because I always like to work with definitions. So the first definition, of course, is security operations centers. In my opinion, they're a central point of knowledge on cyber defense. And there's a lot of discussion on what does a security operations center look like. And basically they're not the same. I think that was the title of the survey about 2 years ago that you did, Chris. There's no single definition of a SOC, but I think there's some elements in there that are common in every SOC. So there's some role in prevention and detection and response. But what I see is that SOCs have become much more complex in the recent years. I remember when first dealing with security operations centers in the Netherlands, it was mostly just deploy a SIEM solution and there's your SOC. Basically, the SIEM was sort of equivalent to the SOC, and I think that we've grown from that, and we've done there's a lot of things that have been added to a SOC. So in terms of visibility, also in terms of services that we need to deliver, like threat intelligence, threat hunting, there's loads of things that have been added to the SOC portfolio, if you will. So I think we've seen a lot of complexity being added to security operations centers. So there's also a need to sort of model that and simplify it in order to keep it manageable. Another definition I'd like to give is something about cyber defense, because I was saying, okay, so a SOC has a role in effective cyber defense, but what exactly is effective cyber defense? And in my opinion, that means that controls are functioning as designed, leading to systems being secure. And when there is a sort of inevitably you will eventually get a security incident, then everything is in place to limit or negate the impact of such incidents. So I think that is, in my opinion, that is what cyber defense is about. And I think the SOC has a really important role in cyber defense. But to determine whether or not your cyber defense is effective, you would need some sort of measurement. And this is why I created the SOC-CMM. I created it as part of my master thesis back in 2016, and it was designed to grow, mature your SOC. Back in the day when I started this SOC-CMM, I was looking into any models that were available that were that had some information on how to measure your SOC, and I found out that there's loads of I think any major consultancy company will have their own model, and any major consultancy company can help you to do an assessment, but they're not. It's not clear what the metrics are. It's not clear what exactly they are measuring, and so you can't repeat that. Yeah, well, you can, of course, by doing it again and asking them the next year to do the same assessment. And I wanted to provide something that is built on scientific research, but is also free for everyone to use. So that's why I created the SOC-CMM, which measures capability and maturity, hence the CM at the end of the abbreviation. And what you can do with the SOC-CMM is do an assessment, but you can also use it to demonstrate your growth, to demonstrate your return on investment. And how that works is you do an assessment, and then you come up with a road for improvement, and then the next year you do that assessment again, and you can show the difference. You know, you've set out to accomplish goals, you've set out to enhance and improve your SOC, and with that second assessment you can actually show that the efforts you've put into it are at least giving you a better cyber defense. That's what it's all about. Now, the evolution of the SOC-CMM, the way I did this, I did some research in cooperation with multiple SOCs based on diversity and usability. And what I mean by that is, of course, I had my connections within the financial landscape, but there was also other sectors that I tried to involve. And in the end, there were 18 SOCs that were part of this research in different sectors. So, and those could be like really large SOCs of several hundred people operating globally, to smaller SOCs, very small teams. The Volksbank, for example, is a medium-sized team in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, maybe I think the SOCs are in general a bit smaller. So, for example, the Volksbank is a team of 15 people. Another bank had a team of 350 people. So that's a lot of diversity right there. So different sizes, different ages. Some of these SOCs were only in existence for 1 or 2 years, while others were already established like 10 years ago. I also focused on usability. So I wanted to create a product that you could just download and use without much explanation. It should be self-explanatory. That was the idea of the SOC-CMM. So I published it in 2016. I had a major update in 2018. That's when I released version 2.0. I actually asked Chris to do a bit of reviewing there, and some other people have reviewed as well, just some industry experts, which I think that was some very, very interesting and very great input that I had. And right now I'm working on a new update, and I'll be sharing later on in this presentation what that update is going to be, looking like, you know, in general terms. What you get with the SOC-CMM is basically a measurement and a metric. So if you want to establish how effective your SOC is operating, you will need to do some measurements. And the SOC-CMM is exactly that. You know, it's the matrix. This presentation is called matrix on steroids. So there's a lot of matrix in the SOC-CMM. There's a lot of knobs to turn on, and just to determine in detail how your SOC is looking. This is the output from the SOC survey that is currently underway. It's Chris's SOC survey, and you can see that 31% of the people that responded to this survey are already using the SOC-CMM, and hopefully after today that will be a further increase in the usage of the SOC-CMM. If you haven't done this survey yet, I urge you to do it. Just to take the survey, go to soc-survey.com, and you will be redirected to the Google Docs where you can fill in how your SOC is doing, what you're using. I think it's a great tool to get an overview of how SOCs are doing globally. All right, now the SOCCMM model. So it's pretty basic. Essentially, we have one security operations center, and then there's 5 domains. And what you see here is the typical people, process, and technology triad. This is what the triad I initially started out with. But I quickly found out that, you know, that isn't enough. You need a business side as well. You need things like governance, things like how does the SOC align to your business needs. And on the other hand, you know, people, processing, technology are of course great, but there's services that need to be delivered by the SOC. So there's services I think are very essential for your SOC. They have underlying technology, there's processes supporting the services, and there's people, of course, running the services. And by using the technology, I think services is a separate domain, in my opinion, so that's why I made it also a separate domain in the SOC-CMM. And I added another layer, and I call this layer the aspects. Basically, if you look at this, it's just a further drill down of these domains. So from business, we go into business drivers, we go into governance, we go into charter, privacy, and customers, and just a way to get a more detailed view of that business domain. So when you're assessing with the SOCCMM model, when you're assessing with the SOCCMM tool, then you will be working on these aspects, and they will eventually get you a sort of aggregated score for that domain. I will show you later what that looks like. If you look at technology, you see here there's SIEM, there's IDPS, there's security analytics, and there's SOAR. I think this is one of the things, and also you see the same with services. What you see here is the effect of modeling. When you're modeling, you need to simplify things. When you're modeling, you can't take everything into account. So you need to look for a sort of common denominator. What services and technologies do most secure operations centers have? This is what I came up with. Of course, there's a lot of other technologies that you can come up with that could be part of your security operations center, but yeah, when you're modeling, you have to make choices, and this is the choice that I made. One last thing about this picture is that you see 2 colors. There's blue and there's purple. Within the SOC-CMM, you're measuring both capability and maturity. Now, for the first 3 domains, the blue ones, you're only measuring maturity. For the last 2, in technology and services, you're measuring both maturity and capability, because capability, at least in my book, the way I implemented in SOC-CMM, is more of a technical capability. What can you deliver as a security operations center? So that's more on the technical side of things. To give you an example of what the SOC-CMM, how it's built, you know, how it's designed, let's look at the charter. I think the charter is a very important document for any SOC. I think any SOC should have this, because it basically outlines what your goals are and what you're going to do. So there's a mission there, there's a vision there. There's also a scope and operational hours. There's things like statement of success, and you define your stakeholders. If you do not have this document, it's going to be rather difficult to defend why you're doing certain things and not doing other things. So if you're looking at the way the SOCCMM works, is when we go into that, we drill down into that aspect charter, then the first thing we're going to be looking at is the completeness of that aspect. Are all these things in place within your charter? The next question to ask, is it formally documented in a single place? Is it like distributed over different documents, or is it one single document called the SOC Charter where everything you see, all these aspects, all these elements are in place? And then, has it been formally approved by senior management? Because if that is the case, I think that makes a charter so much stronger and so much better to use. And the last thing is, are you then regularly updating the charter? So for example, once a year, you're looking into the charter again and seeing, has anything changed in terms of scope or operational hours? Has anything changed in the stakeholders? There might be additional stakeholders, or some stakeholders might not be as important anymore as they used to be 1 year ago due to organizational changes. So you need to revise this regularly. And this is the sort of way the SOCCMM works. It just looks at each of these aspects and evaluates different angles of that aspect. And how that's done is just through 5-point scale for scoring each parameter. There's these questions, there's the parameters, and you get a 5-point scale to do to assess that particular parameter. There's guidance provided there for all maturity questions, and that guidance you can actually use as a sort of guideline. And I say guideline very strongly because it doesn't dictate what that should look like. It doesn't dictate exactly how you should be running your SOC. It sort of guides you to help you find the right answer to that question. The advanced version also has a weighing feature that you can use to make some aspects more important or less important, some questions more important or less important, that sort of weigh more on the score or less. What that looks like is more or less this. So this is Excel based. I've done some tricks to make it look at least Excel-y as possible, but still underneath it's just Excel. So these, for example, this is the people management aspect of the people domain. There's these 10 questions that you can answer, and you can see in the column after importance, there's guidance there that helps you to choose the right sort of level where your SOC is working at. Now that's the input side of it. Of course, there's output as well. So what you get out of it is very detailed maturity and capability scoring, and aggregated maturity and capability scoring per domain. And you can actually use these to compare them to target levels. And again, what that looks like is sort of, I have these Spiderweb diagrams. On the left side here, you can see a blue line and a green line. The blue line is the maturity line, as I indicated earlier, that so maturity is measured through all domains throughout the SOC-CMM, while capability is only measured for the technology and services domain. So that's why the green line is not as extensive as the blue one. And another thing to keep in mind is that the SOC-CMM uses is sort of loosely based on CMMI levels, and CMMI defines maturity through level 5 as a maximum, while capability has a maximum level of 3. So there's a different scale there, and it's very important to realize that there is a different scale. And what you can see from the left side is that detailed score per aspect. On the right side is the aggregated domain score that you can actually also have a sort of target score to compare against, and to find out whether you're doing what you set out to do, if you're doing it at the right level. I also added alignment, and I thought this is very important because, of course, a SOC-CMM is a sort of a separate standard, and I wanted to make it more valuable by connecting it to something that people were already using. So I chose the NIST cybersecurity framework for two reasons. One, it's a very extensive framework that is being used, I think, at least in financial sector pretty heavily, but I think across the globe it's a very popular framework. The second thing why I used it is that the NIST cybersecurity framework already has an alignment to things like the CIS standard, to ISO standards, to COBIT standards. The alignment's already there. So if I align to NIST TSF, then it will automatically align to all those other standards. So I created a mapping between all the questions that I'm asking in the SOC-CMM and the detailed aspects within the NIST cybersecurity framework. You can actually find this as a separate download if you want to know exactly where that scoring comes from, but it looks sort of like this. What you see here again, maturity and capability, different scales and capability, I think across the board here, except for one thing, which is recover. And I've had a bit of discussion there, but in my opinion, recovery isn't really a SOC business. I think the SOC is very much heavily involved in the detect and respond phases, also has some heavy dependencies on the protect and identify phases, but recovery, post-incident, recovering to a well-known and secure state, I think is mostly just an IT thing and not so much something that a cyber defense center or a SOC should be doing. So that's why it's not included in this part. I've also done a reverse mapping looking at all these aspects in the NIST CSF, and I didn't really find anything that I thought was of value to add to the SOC-CMM in terms of the recovery, on the recovery part of the CSM. Okay, so having said this, I want to introduce a sort of model for detection and response. I just found out that there's something a little bit wrong with the order of this animation, but bear with me here. This model, I think the way I envision it, it has 5 phases. So the first phase is a design and build phase, then going into a run, that's the operations. And during that operations, you also do a measure and validate. So the idea is to start out with a design and then continuously improve through measure and validate, just determining how am I doing, what do I need to improve, and then incorporate those improvements again into your design and run. Some of the things that I mentioned, so the Magma use case framework was something I mentioned in the beginning. What this can do in design and build is help you to outline your detection, outline how you're going to be deploying your use cases. Magma use case framework is a top-down approach for risks to actual security monitoring rules for creating your security monitoring. So the idea here is you can use the Magma use case framework to go from risks to security monitoring rules and also to structure your rules. Magma use case framework also has embedded metrics, and I'll show that later. The other thing, the other major framework that's very important is, of course, the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. I don't think there's any SOC right now that is not using the MITRE-ATT&CK framework, at least not that I know of. Every SOC has adopted this MITRE-ATT&CK framework. It's very important to know what your attackers are doing, what capabilities they have, what sort of techniques they're using to intrude your enterprise environment, and what their options are once they're inside. And I think this is, if you look at the way the cyber kill chain works, one of the major things with the cyber kill chain is that it is it's very high level. It helps you to outline the anatomy of the attack, but it doesn't help you to actually find out what the attackers can do. And I think that the MITRE ATT&CK is a great framework to actually answer that question. What can attackers do to gain access to your enterprise environment, and what can they do once they're inside? So I think this is a major thing to look at, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The Magma use case framework already was aligned with MITRE ATT&CK, but it's been released a couple of years back, and there have been a lot of changes to MITRE ATT&CK. Most recently, of course, the sub-techniques. So that will not be in the template you can download for Magma use case framework. That will not be up to date on the most recent version of MITRE ATT&CK. Okay, that's the input into your design and build phase. The next thing is your run phase. You know, the actual operational phase. And I think what's very important here is the core security monitoring. What if you're familiar with Gardner and Anton Tchivarkin, you might recognize these three things. The three. So that's the SIEM, the EDR, and the NTA. This is the visibility triad as coined by Anton Tchivarkin in 2015. SIEM provides visibility on using your logging. EDR will provide visibility on your endpoints, and finally NTA will provide visibility on the network. Now, I've actually taken the liberty to add SOAR to this equation centrally, because I think SIEM and EDR and NTA, these can often have their own views, their own analysis dashboards and stuff like that. So it's very good to have a single pane of glass, which could be your SOAR, just to ingest all that information and also do automation. So that's a bi-directional arrow. As you can see, the SOAR can, for example, send to the SIEM queries for additional information to provide more context to the alerts. The EDR can be used to feed into the SOAR, but also the SOAR can tell the EDR, for example, to contain an endpoint. Lastly, the SOAR can communicate with the NTA to provide, for example, a packet capture of a specific event that is being analyzed. So that's the core security monitoring right there. And I've actually, in my opinion, there's two types of monitoring that you can do. So there's reactive monitoring based on alerts. I think this is the traditional monitoring that we've seen that has started with the CM systems. And the other thing is proactive monitoring, which is threat hunting. Nothing new per se, something that that SOCs have been doing for a long time, but it now has a formal name, and I think there's more and more known regarding methodologies. So one of the methodologies I've been working on is the Tahiti methodology, which basically is a threat hunting methodology using threat intelligence. So that actually stands for Tahiti is an abbreviation for targeted hunting, integrating threat intelligence. So a threat intelligence based approach on threat hunting. As I see it, threat hunting has become increasingly popular and more important for security operations centers. And finally, of course, if you're doing this monitoring to be able to find adversaries in your network, so there will have to be inevitably a response, a security incident response process. So that's the run phase. Now let's look at the measure phase, because that's also important. As I was saying, Magma has some embedded metrics, and that metrics help you to determine how effective your rule set is. Don has just been talking about the playbooks and using metrics on playbooks. I think this is very similar. But instead of the playbooks, you're focusing on the security monitoring rules themselves. So, for example, inputs like the number of false positives, potentially the number of false negatives, which you might be able to derive from the last time that rule has fired. And there's, of course, lots of other ways to measure the effectiveness of your rule set, and Magma provides some pointers as you might as to how you might be able to do that, and also measure your visibility. I think that's a very important thing. Visibility being I think it's in sort of increasing. It's a sort of concepts being used increasingly across security operations centers, is to get a grip on your visibility. I was saying the visibility triad, but just deploying these tools doesn't really give you an idea on how your visibility is. You can just say, okay, so I've got visibility on my logs, I've got visibility on my network, I've got visibility on my endpoints, but how well am I doing in terms of visibility compared to the attacks that I can expect? And the detect tool that Rabobank, which is a Dutch bank, has created, can be used for that. So what it does is actually map your visibility against MITRE ATT&CK to determine how well you're doing with your detections and your visibility tools, to find out how much of the attacks types that the adversaries can use you're actually capable of detecting, and how well those detections are working for you. So I definitely recommend you, if you're not familiar with that, look into it. So that's the measure phase, and there's also a validate phase, because measuring still is a sort of paper exercise. So of course, very important to also validate how you're doing. And in my opinion, you can do that in two ways: by purple teaming or red teaming. So the purple teaming purpose is mostly monitoring, validation. Just take someone from the blue team, someone from the red team, put them together in a single room, start validating your monitoring rules. You can take, for example, one of these. I think MITRE has just released the library of. They started the library of the attack simulations. So you can take one of those documents and try to execute an attack the way one of these advanced persistent threat would do. And you can use that to validate the monitoring against those specific attack techniques. On the other hand, even better, if you have the capability to do red teaming, to validate your monitoring and also validate your incident response by actually performing a simulated attack on the network and challenging your blue team with a sort of a smart attacker that can actually respond to see and respond what the blue team is doing to try and to gain and to retain your network access. So that's the validation phase right there in purple teaming and red teaming. And finally, that needs to feed into improvement as well. So validation will lead to, will uncover problems in the run phase, will uncover problems in the design and build that you can address, and the measure phase will do the same thing for you. You can use this as a sort of approach to do continuous improvement. And I've positioned the SOCCMM in the improvement improvement lane as well, because in my opinion, SOCCMM provides a very broad improvement framework. It measures your SOC as a whole and all the aspects of the SOC, and not so much only detect and respond. Lastly, this is the order that I was talking about. So what you can see now is the detect and respond sort of swim lanes, if you will. So the top part is about detections, and the lower part is about incident response. And I've added one lane here as well, which is the threat intelligence. And I think a very important threat intelligence to provide input and context into each and every one of these phases, into the design and build phase, or you'll run, you'll measure, you'll validate. And I think it's very important, because without this, you wouldn't be able to make proper choices regarding what's part of MITRE ATT&CK to address first. You cannot monitor everything. It's too much. You need to make choices, and you need to make these choices using threat intelligence to make a sort of risk-based evaluation of your security monitoring. Okay, so wrapping up, some of the key takeaways here. If you want to increase your SOC effectiveness, you will need to do some measurement, and SOCCMM provide exactly such a measurement, such insight, and to be able to improve your SOC. You can download it for free, you can use it for free, there's no registration required. You can leave your email address if you want to be connected to the emailing list. but there's no cost associated with the SOC-CMM. And I want to do some final remarks here. I think very important to realize maturity comes at a cost. And that cost is basically resources. No SOC should ever have the ambition to be as mature as possible. You have a SOC ambition, and your maturity level should match that ambition, because the higher your maturity level, the more time it will cost to remain at that maturity level and to act at that maturity level. So you have to choose this wisely. What is the optimum maturity level that is aligned with your SOC's goals and your SOC's ambition? And the very last remark I want to give you is the validation part. We've already discussed it in the model, but you know, I always say red team or it didn't happen. So great scores on paper, but you actually need to deal with an attack. What happens? What happens with the SOC? You can be very mature on paper, you can be very capable on paper, but in the end, there's people there that need to have the right skill set, that need to have the right abilities to deal with an actual attack. So capability and maturity levels are not a replacement for experience. So do these validation tests, do these red team tests. They will be of great value, especially if your SOC doesn't deal with a lot of incidents. Not every SOC deals with a lot of incidents every day. So it's great to actually have this and test it and make sure that when some real incidents happen, that you're able and capable to deal with that properly. Okay, so if you want to download and see the SOCCMM, here is the URL for that, www.soc-cmm.com, where you can download the SOCCMM. There's also a separate SOCCMM for security incident response teams. It's called SOCCMM for CERT, and is downloadable from this site as well.